Last time we finished Borowski's story, but strangely enough, I don't think that's where the conversation ended. And in fact, I think that's where it truly began. Because when I closed the books, Nessie, I realized like I wasn't thinking about Auschwitz anymore. I was thinking about people.
Think about people exactly, and Borowski never asked us to simply remember history. He asked us to examine ourselves. And perhaps that's why his work continues to disturb readers almost 80 years later.
So tonight, instead of returning to Auschwitz, we'd like to ask a couple of questions that Borowski quietly left behind.
Let's go.
Adventurers?
Welcome to Human Babble Podcast, where Plato shares snacks with the weekend and Schopenhauer gets lost in a Spotify playlist. In our freaky studio where cats knocking things over.
We explore the chaos of being human through art, books, music, and philosophy, like a brainy fever dream with good lightnings. Strap in, it's weird, it's wise, and it's probably cheaper than therapy.
How did ordinary people stop asking questions, Nessie? Well, because when we think about Auschwitz, we usually divide people into two groups. First, the victims, second, the perpetrators. But history was shaped by far more than just those two, actually. Some became victims, some became perpetrators, and some resisted. Some remained silent, and somehow every one of them was still human. You know what I feel, Nessie? Curiosity is what keeps us from accepting something simple because everyone else accepts it. In fact, I wrote something while I was thinking about this thing. You know, you always write quotes, you always give quotes. I'm like, okay, it's my turn. So here we go. The question is to spark belief. In curiosity, we find life, and in staying curious, we truly stay alive. But then somehow, like something happened for some reason, those people stopped questioning Nessie.
What happened? What happened to
Hmm.
them?
That's the question. What happened? Did they stop questioning because they were afraid? Because they were obedient? Because everyone around them believed the same thing? Or because questioning simply became too dangerous. And maybe that's the most uncomfortable part of Borowski's writing, right? Not that every evil exists. Little by little, people stop asking questions.
Mm-hmm. And I have the feeling that a
Hmm.
certain epoch has faded away. I cannot clearly define where the boundary lies, but somewhere along the way we obviously crossed a line.
Oh, certainly.
Yeah, and this is not a new thought, of course. After the Second World War, the German philosopher Theodor W. Adorno famously wrote that to write poetry after Auschwitz is barbaric. Well, it was as if Auschwitz had changed the meaning of art, the meaning of language, and humanity
Hmm.
itself, right? As
Yeah.
if the words had entered a new reality. Perhaps we gained a new quality, you know,
Hmm.
quality of perfection, the perfect art of killing, and barbarism wrapped in politeness, organization, procedure, and efficiency. That is the one perspective.
Hmm.
Something new began after Auschwitz. We became accustomed to evil. And perhaps this is what makes evil so disturbing. It can be spectacular and ordinary at the same time. Hmm.
Yeah.
It can appear enormous, almost unimaginable, but it can also become routine. A procedure, a daily task, something people learn to accept because it happens again and again and again and again, yeah. And maybe the new word constantly demands something louder, faster, and more expressive. Something powerful enough to break through our growing indifference. But there is another perspective. Perhaps
Oh.
evil, yeah, did not begin with Auschwitz. Perhaps it has always existed in human life. You know, mm,
Yeah.
we are built from contradictions. We carry
Oh, for
extreme
sure.
values, mhm, these values within us. We are constantly thrown into situations where we must choose. We must choose between what is right and what is easy, between compassion and self interest, between responsibility and silence. And this is where the moral dimension begins. How can a human being be cruel and loving at the same time? How can the same person protect one life and destroy another? And perhaps we never truly know what to expect from another person or even from
Oh, we can
ourselves,
never.
especially,
Yeah.
mhm, especially from ourselves. We live in
Mhm.
a state of endless hesitation, constantly trying to understand where goodness ends and cruelty begins, and whether that boundary is as stable as we want to believe.
Mhm.
But um, tell me, Darkster, tell me what
Yeah.
happens to morality under impossible circumstances?
Um. Honestly, Nancy, the more I think about Borowski's stories, the more I realize they aren't simply about life inside us, as you said, right? And to my
Yeah.
understanding,
Mm-hmm.
they're more about morality and perhaps like about how fragile morality can become. These two words may sound very simple, like, but they're so deep, Nessie. Fragile morality. We often like to believe that we're good people. We tell ourselves, like, I'd never betray someone. I'd never become a part of something so cruel, right? I'd never lose my humanity. I'd never do this, yada, yada, and so on. But
Of
then
course,
again,
we love saying that. We love just,
yeah,
mm,
we are
exactly.
humans. We like babbling. But I'd never but then I stop and I ask myself, have any of us have ever had our morality tested? Like truly tested? Not in comfort, not in peace, but in fear, in hunger, in the desperate struggle of surviving another day. And that's where Borowski leaves me uncomfortable. Because I think he's asking us to judge the people whose morality broke. He's asking us to understand just how much pressure it takes before a human being begins to compromise. But at the same time, there are people who refused, Nessie. People who chose suffering, people who chose death, rather than becoming a part of killing itself. Which leaves me to another question I've never been able to answer. Does survival justify the loss of morality? Nessie, this question, I feel like those people, Nessie, think about it. There were people.
Mm-hmm.
One
Yeah,
side,
and
there are
I think
people.
we have today a lot of questions and less answers.
Exactly. I mean, there are two sides of people. One side which shows like to become like SS guards and members, those would kill their own kind. And on the other side, there are people whose morality they didn't break despite being in such bad circumstances. So how do we tell people like, okay, they were bad, they were in a bad situation, and they chose to do something else? But on the other hand, we can see people who chose death, right? It's not justifiable, I feel, but that's a question left for people to tell and answer, right?
Is there a line? Is there a line that
Yeah,
should never
exactly.
be
Is there a
crossed?
line? Yeah, is there a line that should never be crossed, no matter what it cost? And honestly, I see, I don't know like where the line is exactly. Maybe that's exactly what Borowski wants us to do, struggle with. Not to leave his stories believing we know the answers, but to leave them questioning whether our own morality is unshakable as we like to believe.
As we like to believe, yeah.
Yeah.
I want to talk about this moral responsibility you started with, because you inspired me to go further. You and of course the story we were talking about in the previous episode is
Yeah.
is another question. Is
Mhm.
silence a form of participation? This question returns again and again, no matter how serious the situation is. Should we react when we see another human being suffering? Should we intervene when even if doing so could put our own life at risk. And if we
Mm-hmm.
remain silent, do we become guilty? Not because of what we did, but because of what we choose not to do. Well, I don't want to enter here into a long philosophical debate about subjective and objective morality. No, no,
Mm-hmm.
no.
Yeah.
Perhaps what we should do is ask ourselves every single time, what should I choose now? And the most difficult part is that the answer is never completely certain. We do not know whether our choice is right. We don't know that. Sometimes we have to adapt to the circumstances. Sometimes we want to survive, just survive. But here comes the paradox.
Mm-hmm.
While trying to save our own lives, we also want to save the human being inside us, the part that
Yeah.
remains humble, vulnerable, and capable of feeling another person's suffering. We do not
Mm-hmm.
want to be selfish, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And yet sometimes perhaps we have to be. We have to be. Every decision belongs to, I believe, particular moments, a
Mm-hmm.
particular person, and particular set of circumstances, you know? What seems morally obvious from a safe distance, the distance is very important. So it may become painfully complicated when fear, hunger, danger, or survival enter the equation. And perhaps this is no universal answer, and perhaps there is only the individual standing before a choice and
Mm-hmm.
carrying the consequences of it afterward.
Hmm. Well, I have an interesting top. I have an interesting point actually. This has been in my mind. So it's about identity, Ashley Nessie. So what remains when everything else is taken away? Let me just put you this way. I have a question for you, by the way.
Okay,
Um,
you can
yep.
ask.
If tomorrow morning you wake up and you couldn't remember your name, your family, your dreams, the people you love, would you be still you, Nessie?
Oh, I have no idea. I have no idea. Hmm. Perhaps everything I have said is still only a hypothesis. You know, a way of trying to understand
Mm-hmm.
something that may remain beyond our understanding.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I believe that we are far more complex than we know. Um, Let me explain you this way.
Okay.
Neither science nor religion, philosophy, or psychiatry can give us one complete answer. You know, each of them offers a different perspectives. That's the thing. But none seems capable of explaining the entire mystery of what it means to be human. But
Mm.
from my perspective, yes, I think we are still the same human beings because we have not changed as much as we believe. Maybe we have simply forgotten who we are, or perhaps we have been thrown into another level of existence, a different reality to the self. I don't know that I answered, but yeah, I think we are the
Well,
same. Only in different reality.
yeah, well, I would say a difference of opinion, perhaps, because I asked this question to myself, and honestly, if I don't remember my name, my dreams, my love, the people I love, and my dreams and everything, how will I be myself? I won't. It won't be me. There won't be no essence of me, I feel. Because that's why Borowski's writing is so heartbreaking for me. And yes, people survived Auschwitz, Nazi, I agree. A lot of people survived Auschwitz. But I often wonder just how many of them were able to return to the same person they once were before. Do you feel what I'm saying?
Of course.
Because
Yeah.
survival isn't always about the body. Sometimes it's about protecting the person you were before everything changed. And maybe I feel I still feel like, I'm an optimistic person. I feel like there's a way back to ourselves because we know who we were once before. I'm not saying that journey would be easy. I'm not even saying everyone can find their way back even. But perhaps as long as we can remember the person we once were before, a part of that person is still alive within us. If we s- maybe we might spend our whole life becoming someone, right? And perhaps that's what truly makes us human. Isn't our success, our names, or our achievements. Maybe it's our memories, our hopes, our suffering, and the morality we chose to hold on to, even when life asks us to let it go.
Yeah. Even if life asks us. Well, I think it's very complex question. Can we be the same person? I would love to hear from our listeners what they think about it. Can we?
Exactly. Yeah.
Or
I'd
it's a
love to
different
know.
level? Yeah,
hmm Because you
um,
see, everyone is different, right, Nestle? You,
of
I,
course.
we all have different perceptions.
Yeah, we are individual beings.
So, Nessie, how about you shed some light about literature today?
Okay, literature.
Mm-hmm.
We are not necessarily less broken than people were before. Perhaps we are simply broken in different ways. And contemporary protagonists still struggle with loneliness, identity, fear, desire, alienation, and the constant search of meaning. It reminds me about the book we've been reading, um, Haruki Murakami, Kafka on the Shore.
Yeah, correct.
That's why it took us some time to record this episode because we didn't have time for that. We were
Exactly.
just we were drowning, into this book, into this novel. Amazing one.
Drowning
And
feels like a very less word I can express with.
yeah, and it is the problem is still the same as I said. Like those protagonists, like here, Kafka, Tamura,
Mm-hmm.
struggle with, like for example, this character, but any other, like you read Vegetarian as well, and
Mm-hmm.
by
Yeah.
Kang lately, yeah. But sometimes I feel that the word of the past, the word before the Second World War, seemed more organized. It was built around stronger beliefs and clearer virtues and more visible social rules. Do you have this feeling?
I do have this feeling. I feel the same.
Yeah. And perhaps people felt more connected to one another. They met, spoke face to face, belonged to communities, and respect certain boundaries, even if those boundaries were sometimes restrictive or unfair. Today, it often feels as if we can do almost anything. The
Mm-hmm.
limits
Yeah.
have become blurred for sure. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Nearly every action can be explained through identity, freedom, or tolerance. Of course, these ideas are important, okay? But sometimes the
Mm-hmm.
language surrounding them becomes exaggerated. And perhaps we use it so easily, as if every choice must be justified or
Mm-hmm.
turned into a personal truth. But this is the world we live in.
Yeah,
And I wonder,
exactly. That's the world we live in.
mhm,
True.
are we really different from the human beings who lived before the Second World War? I am not sure. Perhaps we are still driven by the same desires, the desire of power, recognition, belonging, safety, pleasure, and control. Maybe human nature has not changed at all.
Maybe it
Perhaps
hasn't.
only the world around, yeah, the world around us has become, as I said before, faster, louder, and more extreme. And sometimes I have the feeling that we are living closer to the edge, not because we have become entirely different, but because we have pushed the same old human desires further than before.
So, Nasi, after everything we have read, what did Borowski teach us? Perhaps the most disturbing thing is that stories do not allow us to remain outside history. We cannot simply look at Auschwitz and say they were different from us because they were humans. Perhaps this is a question we're still afraid to ask. What would we have done? Would we have resisted? Would we have remained silent? Or would we have simply adapted until the unimaginable became ordinary?
Yeah, and perhaps Borowski teaches us not to trust easy answers. History changes, the world changes, but maybe we are still driven by the same fears, desires, and need to belong.
And perhaps this is why memory matters, right? Not because we should live inside the past, but because the past still speaks through us. It reminds us that evil did not arrive with violence. Sometimes it begins quietly, with a word, with a division, a person treated as less human than another. And then, little by little, people stop asking questions.
And the same ability to love and to destroy. That is the contradiction of human being. Perhaps evil does not begin with violence. Perhaps it begins when we stop asking questions.
So, what should we do with the memory?
Carry it, not as something trapped in the past, but as a question we must continue asking.
Because, remembering is not enough. We also have to remain curious, to question what we are told, to notice when cruelty becomes ordinary, and perhaps to protect human beings inside us, even when the world asks us to forget it.
This was the Human Babble Podcast,
The conversation is over.
but the questions are still alive.